It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. There is so much in this show today. You are not going to believe it. You should pay double what you normally pay, which is zero. By the way, later on in the show, I have a classic interview from The Phil Ferguson Show. Pulled it out of the archives because this is the 60th anniversary of this wonderful and delightful Supreme Court ruling. Unlike the stuff we're getting today, it is an interview I did with Ellery Schempp back in 2015. Yes, I've been doing this for more than 8 years, and there's a ginormous catalog of back content. And every once in a while, I get reminded of somebody that I interviewed many years ago, and this is one of those cases. The 60th anniversary. I'm not going to belabor that point too much because you'll understand when you listen to the interview. It is also interesting. I re-listened to the entire interview myself just a couple days ago, how some things are dated already, just from 8 years ago. So understand the interview is from 8 years ago and, listen to it in that context. But the important part is what Ellery is talking about that happened in the 50s and the 60s of 1900s, right? So check that out. You're going to love it. I also have a little segment on ESG and the state of Missouri. I'll explain it in that segment. A fun little bit on a Florida man and a crypto scam. So that was really close to my house, by the way, in the Orlando area. And I also have a nice segment for people who are getting started. So if you want to know where to start, you only have 1,000 or 500, maybe 3,000, whatever, some ideas on how you can get in the stock market with very little expense and participate with the upside of the market, well, and the downside when it happens, which segues right into this little mini thing I just wanted to throw out that I didn't even make a whole segment on. I'm just going to drop this knowledge into the intro part here, just because I was thinking about it lately. I've been making a lot of phone calls to my existing clients to talk to them about the Schwab thing. I've talked about that, so I'm not going to do that here. But one thing that I found delightfully frequent is people are excited their portfolio is larger than it used to be, which is the norm. But for a good part of a year or so, when you would open up your statement and look at the previous quarter, it was smaller. If you looked at the previous year, it could still likely be smaller depending on exactly when you looked at it. And that happens. It doesn't happen all the time. It happens often enough to keep you awake at night and to remind you that there is volatility in the stock market. So just keep that in mind. But the funny thing that I was thinking about is that has the market really made money since January 1st of 2022, and we're now past the middle of 23. So I went and just as an example built the S&P 500, and last calendar year, the entire year of 2022, it was down 18.15%. I think that's the right number. Yeah. And the question is then how much has it gone up this year? Well, it's gone up 18.38%. I know it's a shock because when the market goes up, it doesn't make the news. Or if it goes up, reasonable amounts, it doesn't make the news. When it goes down, it makes the news. Oh, well, God, the market's down 3% today. Well, the next day it could go up 2%. The day after that, it goes up 1%. And all you ever heard was that it went down 3%. Now, here's the funny thing. is that if you just had the S&P 500 starting January 1st of 2022, and let's say you had $100,000 in there. If this is too big for you, so you can scale it down. If it's too small, you can scale it up. But you get the idea. $100,000 on January 1st of 2022. At the end of the year, after an 18.15% loss, you would have $81,850. So far this year, the market is up 18.38%. Now, for those of you who can do math in your head, 18.38% positive is a bigger number than 18.15% negative. And you would think if that's the only investment you had, you would be in the positive return territory. If you added no money or took out no money, I regret to inform you, you would not be in positive territory. But Phil, how is that possible? It's gone up more than it's gone down. Yes, when you look at the percentage numbers, the percentage increase is bigger than the percentage decrease. So when the market went down, you lost 18.15% on 100,000. When the market went up, you made 18.38% on 81,850. So you didn't make 18,000.38 on 100,000. You made 18% on the 81,850. So the net result is $96,894. Still not so bad. You're almost back to even. And of course, if you added money regularly, if you added money when the market was down last year, you could easily be ahead. And that's a dollar cost averaging perk. So if you're adding money over time and there's a down market, add more money. So you're buying more shares at a lower price. It's an easier way to make money, or a more noticeable way to make money when the market's down. But then I was thinking to myself, well, how did some people who listen to this show do? So I'm going to give you an example, and I have to be very, very careful. This is not an example from any person's portfolio. This is not an example from my portfolio. This is a theoretical, made-up bullshit that I'm going to give you as an example to show you the value of rebalancing. And it also includes a little bit of a perk, a little bit of a benefit, because most of last year, well, for the listeners, all of last year, if you listened to this show, you knew that I was doing 60% value and 40% growth. And again, this is not what anyone actually achieved. It's just for discussion purposes. Keep in mind, I made this scenario up. I did the math. I have a conflict of interest to make myself sound good. So just keep all that in mind, and you can check all these numbers. I pulled them from Morningstar.com. For the S&P 500, I used the mutual fund from Vanguard, VFIAX, which is something I would recommend and do recommend. I also looked at, for the value position, large cap value, VVIAX, and for large cap growth, VIGAX. So you could play along if you want to. Just pause for a second, go find those funds. You don't have to, but here's the deal. In 2022, I was talking about 60% value and 40% growth. If you had 50,000 in each, well, you wouldn't have 50,000. You would have 60,000 in value at the beginning of the year and 40,000 in growth at the beginning of the year. The value fund, the large cap value fund, it went down 2.08%. However, the large cap growth fund went down 33.14. So if 18 sounded bad, 33 is a lot worse. So at the end of the year, instead of having 60,000 and 40,000, you would have 58,754, and you would have 26,744. In this case, your portfolio went from 100,000 to 85,496. In case you forgot, that's bigger than just the S&P 500, which was 81,854. Let's see how much different that was. This number minus this number, an improvement of 3,646. And that's nice. That's absolutely lovely because you were able to avoid some of the downside losses by not having as much money in the growth category as the value category. But as regular listeners know of this show, in January, February timeframe, I made it be known that I was already mostly done switching my clients back to a more neutral 50-50 proposition where half of the money was in value, half the money was in growth. It didn't work out this way exactly for everybody because of complicated reasons like potential tax consequences. Some people added money, some people couldn't add money, some people are in retirement taking out money. So everyone is different, everyone is unique. And again, a reminder, this is a theoretical. So if we take that 85,496 and rebalance it, really, we're finally now, after all this time, getting to the nugget that I really want to stress. We rebalanced it back to 50-50. We could have rebalanced it back to 60-40 because the growth lost so much, you would have to take some from value and put it in growth. But in this case, not only did we rebalance, but we went to a neutral position, at least neutral in reference to how the stock market is normally considered, half value, half growth. It's arbitrary, but that's a norm. And so in this case, you would now have 42,748 in growth and 42,748 in value because that's half of the number you ended up with after the losses of 2022. Now, going forward, and this is irrelevant but fun to look at, year to date, the value fund is up 3.02%. However, the large cap growth fund is up 36.12%. So if you had not rebalanced, you would have a very small amount getting that great big 36% gain, and you would have a considerably bigger amount getting the 3% gain. But because we rebalanced, or the listeners rebalanced back to 50-50, what has happened is you've made 3% on large cap value, and you made 3%, or not 36% on the large cap growth. And so in this scenario, the total portfolio is now worth $102,228. So I think that it's one of the many factors that helped people experience a good result for 22 and the first half of 23, because we dodged a lot of the really horrible downsides on long-term bonds, intermediate bonds. We had more money in value than growth. And we also rebalanced to make them 50-50 best we could in most portfolios near the end of the year or the beginning of 23. And listeners of this show could have done the same thing. So you can rebalance. So the value went from 42,700 roughly to 44, up a teeny bit. But the growth went from 42,700 to 58,200. The combined value, like I told you, was 102 plus 102,000. So 102,000 is more than 100,000 you started with. So in this case, you actually have more money than the person that had just the S&P 500. It works out to $5,334 more dollars. So 5,000 out of 100,000 is about a 5% increase. Again, this is an extreme example. It doesn't often happen like this dramatically, but this is how rebalancing over time might possibly, theoretically, could add what I tell people, 0.5 to 1.5% per year to your portfolio. In this extreme case, it was 5%. This is not the norm. And that's the weird thing with a lot of this stuff. I do it based on long-term historical, maybe projected, but historical mostly, probabilities. The 6 segments that I use for the U.S. stock market: large cap growth and value, mid cap growth and value, small cap growth and value, in the long run, 5, 10, 20 years, have historically shown a thing called regression to the mean, where they generally make about 10% per year, but sometimes in the short term, and for me, short term is 3 to 5 years, maybe in this case, an extreme example, in 1 year, we're not talking about hours, days, or months. You can get things that are out of line, out of whack, and you can use that as an opportunity to rebalance the portfolio. Typically once a year is fine. If you get a couple of years where those 6 different segments that I use all return about the same amount of money, it doesn't really do you anything. But then you get a year like this where, boom, you can, in 18 months, make an additional 5% on your portfolio. So if this was $1 million, it wouldn't be $5,000. It would be $50,000 that you gained by giving it a little attention, keeping your expenses low, keeping your taxes low, using index funds. You don't have to follow my plan, but you should have a plan, and it should have guardrails and calculations at how much variance you're going to accept from the plan. It doesn't have to be every time you see a difference, or it doesn't have to be if it's off by 1 or 2%. But when it gets materially different, maybe that's the time to either rebalance what you have, and that's much easier in an IRA or Roth IRA, or you can rebalance by adding money, which is really easy if you're new to the investment world. So even in a taxable account, if you have $40,000 and you add $6,000, that's a big chunk. That's a big percentage of your portfolio. You can rebalance with the inbound money. A trick that I also use is I often do partial rebalances with dividends, because I pay all the dividends to cash in the account and then use them to buy, because in a taxable account, at least, that's one less sale that I might have to make. And even in an IRA, if there's one less sale, that's one less transaction fee to sell something to be able to buy something. So it's all about costs, expenses, being in the right place at the right time. We had a little bit of that. It doesn't always work out that way. And rebalancing. And so this theoretical portfolio that started at 100,000, it is today, what the math I gave you, value is 44,000 and growth is 58,000. What does that work out to? This, hang on one second, let me do the math on this. You didn't know it, but I paused the recording for a moment. I wanted to check that value now represents 43% of this theoretical portfolio that was only the 2 large cap funds. 43%, and growth is now 57%. If the target is 50-50 and you're off by this much, guess what? Now, even though we just rebalanced or changed the allocation, I'm not changing the allocation, but I'm going through client accounts. I've done this for many of them. I still have some more to do, but you as a listener, if you're kind of sort of following the plan, now is a really nice time to contemplate rebalancing your portfolio or checking to see if it needs rebalancing. If for some reason you are in variance from what I'm talking about as the plan, this may not apply to you, but given this theoretical scenario, you could now have 43% of your large cap money in value and 57% of your large cap portfolio in growth. So that's a pretty big variance. One is 7% below, one's 7% above where it should be. Might be a time to rebalance and make those back even with each other. If you are in a taxable account, hopefully you have some money in a non-taxable account. You can adjust in one account, but not necessarily in both accounts, because this is something I look at the summary level for your portfolio. So keep that in mind. Also, if you are in the position where retirement is a few years away, and we've kind of avoided adding to the cushion for the last year or more because the markets were soft and down, and we try to avoid selling stocks or stock index funds when the market is down. The market is up year to date 18.38%, and your position in large cap growth is up 36% in the last 6+ months. 36% in 6 months. That's fantastic, but it's not really the norm for half a year. It might normally, and there never is a normal year, it'd be up 5%. So it would also be a time for you to think to yourself, hey, maybe I should move 3 or 4 or 5% of my stock investments into the cushion. So ponder that. It's the time when the market goes up is when the best time to move a few percent into the cushion. But it's also the hardest time for most people to think about moving money from stocks to the cushion. And it's kind of like why gambling works, because while you're winning, that's a lot of fun. Who wants to quit? And I'm not suggesting that you quit, but this is the time where you skim a little cream off large cap growth or any other fund that makes 36% in a year or in 6 months. And you don't have to get nutty. Just take a few percent. Now, if you're 20, in your 30s, or in your 40s, maybe even your early 50s, depending on when you're going to retire, if retirement is more than 12, 15 years away, just rebalance. Don't put anything in the cushion. If you want to put a couple percent in the cushion, it's not going to kill me. It's not going to kill you. But you should still be mostly to 100% in stocks if you're 15 years or more from retirement. So consider a rebalance in your portfolio if you're doing it on your own. If you're getting to or near or in retirement, consider rebalancing with a partial withdrawal of just a couple percent at this time and add it to your cushion. Oh my God, that went way longer than I expected. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break and then go into all that extra good stuff I already told you about. I haven't mixed the show together yet, but I'm guessing it's going to be pushing close to an hour and a half. And all of this is free to you. So my request, if you can, go leave a 5-star review or share the show with a friend so more people can listen and learn how to not to get ripped off financially. They can learn how to invest, and they can learn the value of keeping religion out of school, specific to this episode, and maybe, just maybe, someone who is having questions about their beliefs can get some ideas from me and the regular guests, and maybe you can help your friend out of religion, which I think will probably make everything better for all of us in the long run. So don't go anywhere. We're going to get on with the rest of the show.
You know, and nothing seems crazy when you're used to it. There's so much crazy shit everywhere. We're used to it. And everything seems crazy when you're not used to it. That's why so many comics make fun of Scientology, right? Because because it's a batshit crazy religion, but it's no more batshit crazy than every single religion. It's just new, you know? Christianity is super old, but it's fucking crazy. I mean, you're born a sinner. By being born, you are a sinner and you're going to hell. But you can just apologize and then you can go to heaven. No big deal. If you're a murderer, same thing, it's just apologize and go to heaven. You can be Hitler and go to confession and say, "Forgive me, Father, I killed 6 million Jews." And the priest would just be like, "No problem, say 10 Hail Marys." And Hitler goes to heaven. Hitler goes to heaven is the name of my band. Scientology is weird because it's new. It feels weird in our ear holes to hear people worshiping a guy named Ron. We know Rons in our life. He had to change his name to L. Ron because there was another Ron Hubbard in the Writers Guild. That's how recent a religion it is. And people who follow their religion to the letter of the law are just silly. I mean, I want to tell Hasidic Jews, I promise you, God will not mind if you wear a nice cotton blend in the summer. You're being fucking ridiculous. But we live in the greatest country in the world, a country where we have freedom of religion and separation of church and state, only we don't at all, and nobody says anything because we're used to it. It says, "In God we trust" on our money. It says, "In God we trust" above the judge's bench in a courtroom, in a court of law where you have to put your hand on a Bible, the Christian Bible. It's not my Bible. I mean, if I tell the truth, it's because I tell the truth, not because I put my hand on a book and made a wish. That's fucking crazy. That's craziness.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. This is one of those segments that can be very helpful for people that have smaller accounts or are just getting started. One of the important things when you're getting started is to make or save more money. Sometimes people get very, very concerned about what is the absolute best place to put their $1,000. And you can search and find and you can get improved performance, but only to a point. And then you get very quickly to diminishing returns. Obviously, if you have $1,000 today, I would not get cryptocurrency. I would not get an online app or brokerage firm that you can play with stocks on your phone. These are all designed to make money from you by encouraging you to churn and pay transaction costs. Even if they're low transaction costs, they make more money when you make more money. So one of the things I do recommend is that if you're just getting started, to get a total stock market index fund. Unless things have changed, I think that at Vanguard, that does require $3,000. At Fidelity, it doesn't. Last I heard, they had no minimum. And there's also iShares, Schwab, T. Rowe Price, and many, many others. So, that's something that you can look for to get started. And like I said, it doesn't matter how low the expense ratio is, how much that fund actually returns over time. If you're 30, as an example, and you put in $3,000, it doesn't matter how well that $3,000 does. You will never be able to retire. You have to save more. You have to save a lot more. I generally call 10% the suck-ass minimum. 20% is more likely to get you where you want to go. Unless you start saving money when you're 50, then 20% is probably not going to cut it either. Maybe it could help. I mean, I'm not saying do nothing if you can't do 30%, but 10 or 20% when you're 50, you just don't have enough time for the compounding effect to take place unless you work longer. So you don't retire at 50 or 62 or 65, maybe it's 70. Anywho, that's for another topic. But what I want to talk about today is the performance of these different total stock market index, just to make a point. And I found this article on Morningstar.com. And no, they don't give me any money for this. Maybe they should. But anyway, the title of the article is The Best Total U.S. Stock Market Funds. Subtitle, Few in Number but High in Quality. And it is written by John, I don't know how to say his name, Reckenthaler. I'll just go with that. John Reckenthaler. Date April 11th, 2022. So it's a year old, so forgive me for that. But, I got to work with what I have. So it doesn't include the positive market in 23. It doesn't include the negative market in 22. All of its numbers are based on 10-year performance ending December 31st of 2021. And in that 10-year period, there were 2 years where the market was down. Technically, 2015, the market was down, but with dividends, or at least the S&P 500 was slightly up. And 2018, the S&P 500 was minus 4.38%. I use those numbers as a point of reference because you can easily go find them. And the place I always look is Wikipedia, S&P 500, a beautiful table of annual returns and then 5-year annualized returns and 10-year annualized returns, 15, 20, and even 25-year annualized returns. And of course, you will notice, and it's a very important topic, that the variation from year to year can change quite dramatically when you add time into the mix. So as an example, 1-year returns here, an extreme low, 2008, minus 37% when you include dividends. And let's look back into the late 90s, 37, 33% in the late 90s. So it's reasonable that you could make or lose 40%. But those aren't the normal ranges. Those are extreme examples. But when you look at 5-year returns, the range per year over those 5 years is as high as 13.96 and as low as minus 2.35. So 5-year annualized returns, this is from 1969, because the first set of 5-year returns that they show in this table is starting in 74, so it'd be the 5 years before that. So, 1970, 71, 1970. So 50-something years of data, the absolute worst average annualized return over 5 years is minus 2.35 per year. So if you're investing 5 years or longer, for me, I'm thinking I'm going to take the chance, I'm going to take the risk that I might lose 2.35% per year for the potential opportunity of making 14% per year, because each of those occurrences happened once, right? So they're just as likely. But if you look at all of the 5-year returns, let's see here, these are all the negative ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the early 2000s, 6, 7. So 7 times, if you pulled out a 5-year calendar year period, 7 times where you would have lost money. And of the 52 times, 7 times were negative, and that means the 45 times you had a positive result. Fantastic. So if you go out to a 20-year time frame, the worst annual performance per year over 20 years is 5.62% per year. The best has fallen from 14% to 11.45%. But the point here is that your long-term stock market returns are actually more predictable, more consistent, more reliable when you throw in the element of time. Very helpful. Anyway, back to the article. He found, I think 7, 9 maybe, funds that had 10-year returns. So that eliminates a lot. And he had funds that don't have really, really high entry barriers, like a Vanguard institutional fund, which might require $1 million or $5 million to get in. It's something you might get if you work for a big company that has a 401k, but you're not going to go get it with $3,000. So it's nice. He's using the ones that have the easiest barriers of entry as far as finances are concerned. And so for the period ending December 21, the absolute best return was the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index, Admiral shares, 16.29% per year. Again, a very good 10 years, but 16.29. The Vanguard Total Stock Market Index ETF was 16.29% also. Now, the thing that I find interesting is that of all these total stock market funds, they track different indexes, but the absolute best was 16.29% per year, Vanguard, and the worst is 16.03% per year. Almost no difference. I mean, really, that's very, very small. Fidelity is behind the Vanguard funds at 16.25% per year. And there's no way to know that this will happen over the next 10 years. And it'd be really nice to have this data ending December 31st of 22, but I don't have that in front of me here. So I have it ending December 21. Does the negative year, a really big negative year, change how some of this works. I don't know. I don't have that information. But over this 10-year time period, they all returned about the same. The iShares is 16.25. Schwab is 16.19. Vanguard Russell 3000, it's a different total market index, 16.15. So they're all doing about the same. So the important thing that I want to point out, based on this data, if you want the best, it's at Vanguard. The difference between Vanguard, Fidelity, iShares, Schwab, T. Rowe Price, very small. So if you already have one of those other total stock market funds, whether you have a mutual fund or an ETF, by the way, and the Vanguard too, like I said, are 16.29, exact same returns. You don't need to sell one to go to another one that has slightly lower expense ratio. The effect is very, very small. And if you've had money in a total stock market index fund for a while, you may create a tax situation, a tax problem for yourself in a taxable account. So like if I get a new client and they bring over money from Fidelity or T. Rowe Price, and I see this and I go, yeah, you know, you put in 100,000 10 years ago and now it's actually it'd be like 250, 300,000. I don't want to have that much capital gains hit you and cause you a big tax bill. For what? To gain a fraction of a percent more return, fraction of a fraction. I mean, we're talking a few basis points, very small differences. So that's something to keep in mind. But it is a very easy way if you're new to investing. Like I said, if I understand Fidelity is correct, it's no money down. And with Vanguard, it is one share of the ETF. I still recommend the $3,000 if you can master it for the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Admiral shares. I just like it better, you know. But the tracking costs are low. The tracking error is low. The expense ratios are low. Matter of fact, the only thing that really determines the tracking error, the most highly correlated thing, is the expense ratio. And T. Rowe Price has the 0.2 expense ratio. iShares Russell 3000 is 0.20%. And of course, the Vanguard is 0.03 or 0.04, depending on whether you have the fund or the ETF. But we're getting down to differences. Matter of fact, Fidelity says here that it's 0.02, which is lower than both of the Vanguard funds, but it did not have the same return. It's so close, it doesn't matter. Same thing with the expense ratio. So don't drive yourselves nuts. But if you have limited funds or you're just getting started, ignore the plan, the Polaris plan, you know, with 10, 12, 15, 18 different funds. Just get a high quality, very low expense ratio, something below 0.1%. Get a total stock market index fund and find a way to put in more money. If you have $3,000, that's great, get started. But you need to add more money. Otherwise, you won't be able to retire on that money. So just some thoughts on total stock market index funds and how to get started if you have a very small amount of money to start with.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
This is a little update on ESG investing in relationship to the state of Missouri. I know, it's wacky. So here's the deal. If an advisor, a registered investment advisor like Polaris, my company that I run, by the way, I, Phil Ferguson, am not a registered investment advisor. I'm an investment advisor representative. Generally speaking, it doesn't mean much to the public, but those are a few words or titles that actually have meaning, and I'm going to mention them. But I have gotten an update from one of the companies that I hire to help me make sure I follow the rules. And the rules are numerous and multi, and they change. And I haven't yet seen them change to be easier. They just always seem to get weirder and more complicated. So I'm going to read you some information. This is not the text of the law. This is summary information sent to me by one of the companies, like I said, one of the companies that I hire to keep me up to date. So this says here, and I quote, "The Missouri Secretary of State has amended its rule of what constitutes a dishonest or an unethical act to include an investment advisor or an investment advisor representative's failure to obtain written consent when recommending or utilizing discretionary authority to select an investment or third-party manager sub-advisor based upon environmental, social, and governance or other non-financial objectives." So before I explain some of the words in there, a little bit of background. A lot of advisors are regulated by the state in which they are located. Registered investment advisor, investment advisor representatives are state level. I was state level in Illinois for a very long time. And one of the rules that they have is that if you have a certain number of clients in another state, you have to do kind of like what's called a notice filing, or you register with that state as well, and you pay the registration fees, but they don't regulate you. Your home state does. And the reason for this is because historically, because there are so many rules and laws about the industry, which, okay, it's good to have rules and laws, but you would have situations where one state might audit you and say, you must do X, but you have clients in another state. And so that state comes and audits you, and they interpret the laws differently. And they come to you and they say, you must do not X. And so the business owner would be in a position where one regulatory body is telling them they must do something, and the other regulatory body interprets the law differently and tells them you must not do something. And as you can imagine, that puts the business owner in a difficult situation. So you are only audited and officially controlled by your home state. And that's really important. And I don't know if I've ever told you guys, just real short side story here, but in the past, I will get, and I'm sure it'll happen again, I will get documents from California and they say, we want you to complete this survey. Well, the survey that California sends me is basically everything an auditor would ask me when they show up to audit my business from a regulatory SEC perspective. And the first time I got this, I called and finally reached somebody in California and I said, this looks like an audit, a self-audit, honestly. And they said, no, it's not an audit. I go, what do you mean it's not an audit? It's not an audit. It's a survey. Okay. Semantics aside, what happens if I do not fill out your survey? They said, of course, filling out the survey is optional, but if you don't do it, we reserve the right to revoke your license to do business within the state of California. And so now I would be doing something illegal by helping my clients in California. So it's not really optional. It's kind of, so I have to do that, of course. And the first time I did it, it consumed almost a week of time spread out over a week or two. I mean, I had to do it, extra hours and weekends and stuff. The state of California then notified me there's two things they'd like me to do different and or change. And I called them up and I said, okay, so what are the ramifications if I don't do this? What happens if I do this? And they said, oh, because it wasn't an audit, we can't compel you to do anything. Those are just recommendations. Okay, thanks. That's what I needed to know. Anyway, back to Missouri here. So Missouri has made this law. They are going to change I guess they already did change the rule of what is dishonest and unethical act. Now, the first thing I don't know in the state of Missouri, what is the penalty for a dishonest and unethical act? So I'm assuming there's some fine or some jail time, but I honestly don't know. It does mention this applies to an investment advisor which would be Polaris Registered Investment Advisor, or an investment advisor representative, again, Phil, in my case. Failure to obtain written consent. So if I were to recommend an ESG thingy, I would have to send someone a letter that says, hey, this is what I'm going to recommend. Do you consent? And this applies to accounts that have already given what is called discretionary authority. So all of my clients have given me discretionary authority, which means I can log onto their account at TD Ameritrade and in the near future, Schwab, and I can sell some of this one fund and buy some of this other fund. So that's discretionary trading. That's discretionary authority. That is something that is fundamental for me to be able to do my business. Thankfully for me, I don't do ESG investing, and we've talked about that multiple times. And if you have questions, you can always send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. And of course, at the end of this little summary thing, and again, this is not the law, but this is their summary of what they think the law says. It says ESG or other non-financial objectives. What does that include? Is that something that's thrown in at the end? I mean, if I get a tactical fund, is that a financial objective? Am I doing it because I think it's going to make me more money? It's not. But as long as I think it's going to make me more money, but if that's the rule, as long as I think it's going to make me more money, you could be convinced that an ESG fund, it's not, would make you more money because of how it operates. So does the rule apply to both of those things? What if I want to buy an annuity for security and protection? Is that now a non-financial objective because I want the insurance? I don't know. That's a lot of shit. The thing that's extra special here, apparently in the law, it is applied to an advisor, a registered investment advisor, RIA, even if their primary state is not Missouri. So here is an example, breaking, I don't know if it was law or convention or an accepted norm, where a state is going to impose their law on an advisor that is not in Missouri. So you could have a registered investment advisor in a nearby state, Iowa, Illinois, Kentucky, whatever, that doesn't have this rule, but you give this advice to a client in Missouri, and even if you're following all the rules in your home state, you can now be breaking the law in Missouri. And this is a big fucking problem, because if an individual state can slap on additional rules that you don't have to follow in your state, then what does an advisor do if they have clients in 4 or 5, 10 states? How do they follow all the variety of rules in all the different states? They go so far as to say this even applies to SEC firms. I had mentioned a few minutes ago that Polaris was registered with Illinois. At the time that I moved from Illinois to Florida, I also changed from being state registered to being federally registered, because now my company was of a size that would allow me to choose to switch from Illinois to Florida or to switch from Illinois to federal SEC. So I went ahead and went with the federal. There's pros and cons. And for fuck's sake, that was a lot of work. That was a lot of work. The really curious twist is that Polaris is federally registered, but Phil, as the investment advisor representative, is still registered on the state level. And in this case, of course, because I live here, the state of Florida. So I had to go through all the background checks, fingerprinting, criminal background check, all that stuff to be an investment advisor representative that is registered within the state of Florida. Okay, so enough side things. So it's just a funny thing. It's not something that I recommend, ESG. Matter of fact, I recommend not using ESG investments. I think until shown otherwise, it's a marketing gimmick. People want it, people like it, but you make less money. And so here is a case where there is something that has offended some politicians and they want to make it illegal or at least difficult to use. And so far at this time, they're only requiring written consent. And I can imagine at later point, if they want to, they make the written consent more elaborate and inclusive. But they have not made any rules, to my knowledge, in Missouri that stop someone from selling you a limited liability, a limited master partnership. That's the right master MLP, master limited partnership, which I've talked about on the show a couple times over the last decade. Will probably just rip you off from your money. They don't have a problem with that. They don't have a problem with annuities that trick you into thinking you're making your money safe and getting a good return and avoiding the low side when the net result is, in the long run, you make 2 to 4% per year, while the insurance company might make 8 to 10% per year off of your money. They don't talk about any of these things. Those things don't bother them. Regular, long run, big businesses that take money from their clients, not a problem. But if you want to talk about the environment or social governance, they're not preventing you, but they're making an extra step harder. So it's interesting. They also don't have in here anything that says you have to get written permission for a woke fund. So we'll see what happens with this. But this is just one of the behind the scenes little facts, little bits of information that you are not going to get anywhere else other than the Phil Ferguson Show. So, of course, if you like this stuff, go give a 5-star review somewhere, share the show with a friend. That's the end of this segment, and we'll be right back.
As you get older, you just ditch certain things as you get older, and it's a pleasure to do, right? I mean, for example, right, religion is a very good example. I wouldn't be a very spiritual man, right? I don't believe in God, right? Still Catholic. Because there's nothing you can do when you're Catholic. Once you've started Catholic, frankly, there's no real way to stop being Catholic. Even not believing in God isn't regarded as sufficient reason to get out of the Catholic Church. You'd think it'd be fairly fundamental to the whole thing, but no, Catholicism, the stickiest, most adhesive religion in the world. There's no website you can deregister online. You can't put up your membership card in front of a priest and go, "Feck ya, I'm out of here," and walk away. You could join the Taliban. You'd merely be regarded as a bad Catholic. I'm presuming a large chunk of you probably were raised Protestant. Give me a cheer if you had any Protestant upbringing at all. A fair few of you, right? Now, when you do the wafer thing, right, and take the hooks or whatever thing, it represents the body of Christ. It's a metaphor, it's a symbol of the body of Christ. Oh, not when you're Catholic. When you're Catholic, it is the body of Christ. You're supposed to actually believe that it turns into the flesh of Christ in your mouth. Nobody fully explained this to me as a child. I would have spotted the flaw relatively quickly in that. Right? I would have gone, hang on, I might be 8, but I've eaten enough burgers, chicken McNuggets, right? Fish fingers and rashers to know there is no animal flesh in the world that jams itself to the roof of your mouth and hoovers all of the moisture out of your body until you're looking at your mother going, "Can I take it down with my finger?" And look at the roof of my mouth. And she's going, "Do not take it down with your finger. It's the body of Christ. Leave it where it is." And making a show of me in the church. Desiccating me from the inside out. Desiccating, by the way.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. Now I have a little bit of news from Florida. Not a surprise, I guess, but it's from the Orlando area, so not too far from me. But apparently, you'll find this hard to believe, I'm sure, there's a man who was on YouTube who happens to live in the area, and he had a crypto investing fund scam. That's what it turned out to be. But apparently he had a well-known YouTube channel that I'm not going to mention. And he would come on and talk about how much money they've made and how well it's going. And you can invest too and send money to his company. And if the word crypto didn't scare you, which it should, as far as a medium of investment, the fact that he then promised that you would earn 2% a day. 2% a day. Now, I haven't done the math, but it doesn't take you long to figure out that that could become a very, very large amount of money in a very short period of time. And of course, if he's paying you 2% per day, he has to be making more than 2% per day to make it worth his time. And this is one of those things where, it should be obvious to you that there's something wrong. That's just not how the world works. But this was on WFTV, Channel 9, I think out of Orlando. Fascinating story. And of course, they interviewed people that they're like, he tricked me, or I believed he was going to give me 2%. And of course, they're mad at him, which rightfully so, because they, quote, air quotes, invested money with him, and now it's gone. So, just another of the endless examples of where people fall for it because it's crypto. By the way, the total here, according to this news story, may be that this guy collected as much as $60 million from it. If you want to look for the story yourself, it's on the station WFTV 9 in Florida, and the specific article is Train of Excuses. Consumers access Central Florida YouTuber accuse. Oh my God, I can't read. Consumers accuse Central Florida YouTuber of running a Ponzi scheme. Sounds like a Ponzi scheme to me, but I just figured I'd share that because it's really, literally just miles from my house. Another in the endless string of crypto scams.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. My very, very special guest today, I'd like to think he's a personal friend of mine, is Ellery Schempp. How are you today, sir?
Oh, it's good to hear from you, Phil. I love talking to you.
Oh, you're always so polite. I can only assume that you treat everyone better than me.
Well, I'm looking forward to sharing ideas and thoughts with you.
Well, I'm looking forward to, of course, and we're going to talk about some modern day stuff, of course, but one of the things I want to make sure we get out there, and I know you and I have talked about this before in a previous show, but there's always new listeners, there's always new activists, there's always new people that haven't heard this story, and I think it's so incredibly important. And the pre-show, you and I were actually talking about a book called In God We Trust. And hang on a second here, and I'm going to pull it up my phone, and I just got to stall for a few seconds to pretend like this is all planned. But it was a delightful, delightful book, and I can't seem to hit the right buttons. Let's see here. There we go. We're almost there. Yeah, it's good. Makes good radio, doesn't it? One Nation Under God: How Corporate America Invented Christian America by Kevin M. Cruz.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And you said you had a brief talk with him, and he sent you a book?
Yeah, exactly. We had email exchanges, and I mentioned when the book just came out in the middle of the summer, I think, and I mentioned to him that when Congress passed the law and changed the Pledge of Allegiance and added the phrase "In God We Trust" in 1954, in several ways that was a precursor to my beginning to think about this Bible reading and Lord's Prayer practice in the public schools. So it was a kind of backlash, I think, from In God We Trust that led to the Supreme Court case that decided that daily ceremonial devotional readings from the Bible were unconstitutional, a violation of the First Amendment. And obviously the recitation of the Lord's Prayer, which is clearly a sectarian religious prayer, was also unconstitutional. So In God We Trust was a motivator for me.
Well,
I also like to point out that, when we say one nation under God, that is not quite accurate. If you look at a map, we're actually under Canada.
That's funny because I do that when I am compelled to recite the pledge, usually for my local Rotary Club, and they all know that I do it. And there's actually a couple people have joined me in, so we do one nation under Canada.
That's very cute.
It's actually technically correct from a northern hemisphere perspective because one could make the map any direction. So they know that I'm protesting, but I don't know. I'm still torn. I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't even stand, but who wants to make a big scene? But some people.
It's rather bizarre. This is one of the few countries in the world that has any kind of daily activity of reciting a pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States, blah, 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 blah. I mean, the people in France and Germany, Italy, Greece, they don't do that kind of stuff.
Well,
they're advanced and civilized nations.
I always thought that if you were compelled every day to say that you pledge allegiance to anything, do you really? I mean...
Well, and it's like religion by rote. Political statement by rote is not any genuine patriotic expression. And it's also very important to know that George Washington and James Madison and Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln, they never recited the pledge because the pledge wasn't written until 1892. And it only became popular during the patriotic fervor and zealotry of World War I. And then it became more established, and the Boy Scouts started using it, and then it sort of moved into conventional society. But none of the patriotic founders ever said it. So it's clearly not a necessary part of American life or American devotion to our values.
Right. And so that happened in 1954, and that was a little bee in your bonnet. And, of course, you were in school. And where were you in school?
I was in Abington Senior High School, which is a suburb of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania.
And they were compelling everyone to listen to...
Well, there was law in Pennsylvania that required that 10 verses, and I quote here, 10 verses of the Holy Bible must be read or caused to be read at the beginning of each school day in every school classroom throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so, obviously, in the early grades, the teacher read the Bible. And by junior high school, teachers were pretty bored with this, and so they would say to the kids, all right, Susie, you read the Bible today, and Charlie, you read it tomorrow, and we'll go around the room, and that's how it went. And that continued until my senior years in high school when they had a public address system installed, and then somebody read the Bible over the loudspeaker system.
Now, did they read all of it?
But it was required, and the penalties for not doing this were very stiff. A teacher would be fired immediately if she didn't read the Bible.
Oh, that's terrible. Now, did they read all of it, or did they pick and choose? Did they have, like...
All you had to do was read 10 verses. And so when the time came for the kids, hardly anybody remembered when it was going to be their turn. They hadn't done any preparation. And so what you'd do is you'd come in and, somebody would say, oh, it's your turn to read the Bible. And you would stumble around the room and look for the darn thing, open it at random, and then read it. And the only Bible that was provided was the King James Version. So that's a little bit difficult to read, especially if you're in 7th or 8th grade, but anyway, and you haven't practiced, and you have no idea what you're reading because you haven't seen the text before.
Right.
So people would stumble through it, read it rather badly, and after you finish 10 verses, you had done your duty, and that was it. But I always thought it was quite amusing because when they refer to the Holy Bible, a lot of people just don't know that the Catholic Bible is substantially different from the Protestant Lutheran Bible. The Catholic Bible contains additional books that Luther decided he didn't like in the Bible, and they have different numberings of the Ten Commandments, and they have slightly different words in the Lord's Prayer. And that's one of the things I began to notice, actually. That the Catholic kids said the Lord's Prayer in a slightly different way than the Protestant kids did. And, of course, the Lord's Prayer is not in any way Jewish, not in any way Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist or non-believer. So, I mean, it was a totally sectarian imposition on the school children.
So everyone's doing that every day, and they, like you said, they put in the loudspeaker system, and you decided to have your own little personal protest. What was it that you did?
Well, I fortunately had some very good friends and a very good family, and I talked over whether this was a violation of the First Amendment, where it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. And I thought this is clearly establishing a sectarian Christian practice in the schools, and a violation, therefore, of the separation of church and state, a violation of the idea that we should be a secular society that's neither hinders nor favors religion. So I, in order to point out that the Bible was not the only holy book in the world, I brought a copy of the Koran to school, which I had borrowed from one of my friend's father's library. And I didn't know a thing about Islam at the time or the Koran or anything. I just knew it was a different holy book. And so I brought this to school, and one of the requirements was that during Bible reading you had to put away all of your other work. You couldn't finish your algebra homework or something. You were supposed to sit at your desk and listen very attentively. And so I very deliberately opened the Quran and read it quietly to myself. I didn't make a fuss about it, but I violated that rule, and I did not stand for the Lord's Prayer. So that brought the matter to the attention of this homeroom teacher. And I was a junior in high school at this time, so I was 16, I guess. And he said, well, you know, you've got to be following the school rules. And I said, well, as a matter of religious conscience, I could no longer do that anymore. And he was very befuddled and sent me off to the high school principal, who was equally befuddled. I said, well, and he said it was a matter of respect and there's 1,600 other students in the school, and they're all obeying the rule and listening to the Bible. Why don't you? And I said, well, I have a respect for the U.S., the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and that leads me to a different perspective. And then he decided that he didn't know what else to do, so he sent me to the high school guidance counselor, who was very keen to inquire whether I was having difficulties at home or having difficulties with my father or having difficulties with respect for authority, and on. This went for a while, and I said, no, don't have any difficulties with my dad whatsoever. I just have a difference of opinion about Bible reading.
And they were having a hard time either wrapping their head around that or trying to figure out what to do about it.
Precisely.
And what they ended up deciding to do.
The principal went home that afternoon and looked up the Constitution and read the First Amendment. But anyway, so anyhow, I came home, and after a while, they sent me back to regular classes, and nothing much happened. And I came home that evening and recited the day's events to my folks over dinner. And my father suggested that maybe I should write to the American Civil Liberties Union, which I did. And I typed out a letter with my two fingers on my dad's typewriter, and sent it off to the ACLU in Philadelphia, together with $10. That turned out to be quite significant, because the ACLU was feeling poor. And then, by the way, $10 is worth in 1956 is equivalent to about $90 today. I'm informed. So they got the letter, and they thought that the $10 was pretty nifty. If a kid could save this money out of his chores and allowance, that he might be pretty serious. But it took them a long time to make up their mind about this. And they first, of course, called up and wanted to talk to my folks and asked, to determine whether we were a bunch of kooks or not, and whether we were serious. And they had to make their own determination whether this was a winnable case and how they're going to pursue it, and on and on. That took a better part of a year and a half. And finally, a cooperating attorney, Henry W. Sawyer, from a famous Philadelphia law firm, joined the case and prepared the briefs, and we filed them in federal district court in Philadelphia. And so on August 5th of 1958, the first hearing was held, in which we challenged the Pennsylvania law and asked the court to declare it unconstitutional. Of course, the other side, the school district and the state of Pennsylvania, brought their own attorneys to the case, and so there was a contest. I do remember it quite clearly. Not only was I called to testify, and my brother Roger and my sister Donna and my mother and father were all put on the stand to testify whether my readings from the King James Version of the Bible were in accord with our religious teachings. And we were members of a Unitarian church, so they obviously were not in accord with our teachings and understandings and our humanist kind of outlook on the world. So, but I do remember it very well because it took place on August 5th, 1958, which happens to be my birthday. And I thought that was kind of funny.
Oh, very nice. So this took a couple years to get to the Supreme Court.
It took 7 years before there was a final decision, I'll tell you. So in 1958, that was when the first court hearing came, and then the court deliberated. That took 2 days for all the testimony and arguments, and the court thought about it for, I forget now, 5 or 6 months or so, and finally we won a decision, 3-0. The court agreed completely with us. The district court ruled that the Pennsylvania law was unconstitutional, and then the practice should stop. But of course, in anticipating that it would be appealed to the Supreme Court, they stayed the opinion, so that therefore it didn't have any effect. And then the school district had to decide, and they had a very emotional meeting in which the people came in Abington Township and voted to raise our taxes in order that they could mount a legal argument and appeal it to the Supreme Court. We were in the audience, so we had to hear them argue that they wanted to raise taxes to argue against us. Anyhow, so finally the case reached the Supreme Court. Then a funny thing happened. The legislature in Pennsylvania, in its wisdom, decided to change the law. Now, when we won the original decision, the court ruled that the practice in Pennsylvania, the law requiring Bible reading and the practice of the recitation of the Lord's Prayer, was a violation of both the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, where it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And so we won on both grounds, that this was a violation of our free exercise rights, which was not to be indoctrinated or proselytized. Anyhow, so the Pennsylvania legislature changed the law and added a provision that a child could be excused from the morning devotions. And incidentally, these were called morning devotions, so the religious nature was unassailable. So the Supreme Court, always liking to duck controversial issues, sent the case back to the district court and said, well, why don't you reconsider your opinion in the light of the changed law? And so that was every one of these activities, was a year and a half, 2 years or something. So, but then, and by this time I was off to college at Tufts University up here in Boston, and the court considered the case again and said that even though the law had been changed, it didn't change their opinion, that it was still a violation of the Establishment Clause, in which the government was seeming to favor one religion over another, or favoring religion over non-religion, and that they weren't even sure that it solved the free exercise clause problem, because how can a child be excused from the Bible reading? Well, the only way, even if you don't have a loudspeaker, if you have a loudspeaker system, it floods the whole building, so you can't nothing to do about it. Even if you don't have that, what would a child do? Get up and go out and stand in the hallway and then come back in? Well, that means the child has to self-identify as being a dissenter, has to go, and it's often a punishment. A teacher says, oh, you go stand in the hallway because you've been a bad boy. All right, so it identifies, standing in the hallway as undesirable, or a sign of being a naughty person. So that puts a taint around it, puts a taint around dissent, and leads to taunting and bullying and all sorts of things, right? So the court very much agreed with us, and then so we won again, 3-0, and again it got appealed to the Supreme Court. And in the meanwhile, another case had started in Baltimore, started in 1960, by Madeline Murray, and Madeline Murray, who became famous as an atheist and founded the American Atheist Organization and put a modern-day atheism on the map, more as it were. So her case was almost identical to ours. There was a Bible reading and a prayer practice in the Baltimore and Maryland schools, where her two sons, Garth and Bill, were in school. And she brought the case in the Maryland state courts. And state courts are typically prone to uphold state laws. So we had the advantage of being in federal court, where they're kind of a more neutral decision perspective on it. Anyhow, so her case had wound up through the Maryland courts, and she lost at the Maryland Supreme Court level. The Maryland Supreme Court ruled that the Maryland's practices were constitutional. So she appealed to the Supreme Court. And by sheer accident of timing, our two cases, that is the second appeal on the school board and her appeal from Maryland, reached the Supreme Court at almost identical times, within, I don't know, a couple of weeks of each other. And in spring of 1963, we are now, it's all the way up to 1963. So the Supreme Court recognized that the two cases presented substantially the same issue, and so there's a procedure in which the court consolidates them or joins them, and so that they issue one opinion for both cases. And so the full name, and all of its glory, whatever, is School District of Abington Township versus Schempp and Murray versus Curlett, and that's the actual name of the whole case. And so in June of 1963, the Supreme Court issued its opinion, and it was a wonderful opinion. It was 8-1. Now, you may recall how often we have Supreme Court decisions today, 5-4. If you're lucky, 6-3. This was 8-1, in which they ruled that the Schempps and the Murrays were correct, that the practice in Pennsylvania was a violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution, and the practices of Bible reading, devotional Bible reading, and prayer in the public schools had to stop. And that affected the laws in about 30 states or so, 32 states. And so all over the country, school children no longer were subjected to Bible reading and prayer practices.
So
and of course,
single-handedly,
a little bit of outrage from that.
Yeah, single-handedly as a 16-year-old, you kicked God out of every school in the nation.
Yes. Well, not single-handedly, with the help of the ACLU and my parents.
And now, Eller, if we can, I'd like to talk about some modern-day things and what the Supreme Court is doing today, and what kind of thoughts do you have on that?
Well, I'm very wary of where this present-day Supreme Court is going. It's very significant that the court has been captured by conservative Catholics. 6 of the 9 justices, that represents 67% of the court, are now Catholic, and 5 of these are part of the ultra-extreme majority of the court, Roberts and Thomas and Alito and Kennedy from time to time. They're all they've adopted the Catholic doctrine and all these things, and the Catholic doctrine has emerged. At one time, the Catholics were quite the Catholic Church's official bishops and position was that we are a secular nation, and there should be separation of church and state. But then they came about in the late 1940s, early 1950s, in order to distinguish us from the godless atheists. They adopted a new philosophy, and the philosophy was you're either for us or against us. That is to say that if you have a secular, humanistic, non-religious position with regard to separation of church and state, that means that you're actually anti-religious. And so by changing their outlook, they essentially defined neutrality out of existence. So they don't believe that you can be religiously neutral. They don't believe that you can be secular. Secular just means without regard to religion. It's not. It doesn't mean anti-religion. So that the Catholic philosophy is quite at odds with the ideas of Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and the traditional understanding from the letter to the Danbury Baptists about where religious plurality and religious diversity, what that means in terms of American society. So, and we see the outcome of this, the results of this, in the decisions about the Hobby Lobby decision, in which the court promoted religious faith, religious belief, of any kind, to be superior to the laws. I mean, that's just a bizarre ruling, but it's going to have large consequences. Already is having large consequences. That a church group, a Catholic girls' school, whatever, can decide what laws they think are violating their religious conscience and decide not to obey them. Well, I mean, I think that's just absurd. Laws are passed in a democracy by a majority of the people and their representatives, and the courts interpret them, and it just as a matter of religious faith, you can't go around saying, well, I don't agree with that law, I don't agree with that law. I mean, how about if I have a religious faith that says I don't believe in red lights, I have a religious faith that I believe in smoking pot? Does that mean I can just go ahead and do all these things just because my religious faith? And the key word, of course, here, a sincere religious belief, that's the phrase the court used. Well, I think that's an absurd position, and I think it's very bad for society.
Well, a couple thoughts come to mind is obviously we've come a long way from the famous Kennedy speech where he had to disavow that if elected president, he would not let the Catholic Church control him and that he would do what's best for the people, not
Absolutely.
what's best for Catholicism. And now we've come kind of full circle, and what you're talking about, of course, and everyone gets to follow and choose their own rules. And I think the thing that's even more bizarre with Hobby Lobby is not only is it a sincerely held religious belief, but apparently a corporation can hold a religious belief.
Yeah. Excellent point, Phil. Yeah, I mean, how can a corporation have a belief? I mean, I can understand my neighbor, whatever he wants to believe. But a corporation, I mean, with stockholders and a group of people, no, the idea is so absurd that it's just really disgusting. And, you know, here we look on the candidates for president.
Oh, my goodness.
Jindal and Cruz, Santorum, they're all kind of Catholic jihadis. Well, of course, they're not engaged in violence. I don't mean that. But they're jihadis in the sense that they want to abolish the right to use birth control. They want to abolish, of course, abortion. That's horrible for them. But even birth control and contraception, they're following the Catholic doctrine. And, you know, that's a very big threat. I just don't understand the evangelical, conservative Catholic obsession with sex and an obsession with who has orgasms. I mean, it's really sick. Why not just let the people be alone and do their own thing? And it has nothing to do with public morality. All right, I mean, obviously we have laws against rape and whatever, but what you do in the privacy of your bedroom, why is that should be any concern to Republican candidates?
Well, I think these things swing through time, especially after listening to this wonderful book that we mentioned earlier. You know, they pass these general ideas about God, and most people got into the anti-communist fervor, and they were okay with that. But when you start getting to specifics, people start to push back until we had abortion, and there Protestants and Catholics could unite under the Catholic dogma of not allowing abortions. And at least for now, they seem to be fighting together pretty good. But I think they've made a mistake in continuing this battle. And I'm torn. I wish they wouldn't battle, but I'm glad that they are in a way with this with the gay rights and the gay marriage, because more and more people are being repelled by church. They're being repelled by religion, and they are on the losing side. And it's just a matter of time, and they're going to lose. And it's mostly done now. They just don't know it.
You make a very good point, and I'm kind of happy that we finally say, well, okay, if you're same sex and you want to get married, go ahead and do it. That's none of my business. And it doesn't. I mean, it's a great myth that they promoted that same-sex marriage would destroy traditional heterosexual marriage, and of course that was just turned out to be utter nonsense. I do have I made an interesting observation the other day that they often use the Bible. Quoting from Leviticus and Romans, a couple passages that suggest that God doesn't approve of gay marriage or gay sex or something, or homosexuals, I guess. And so they quote that. Well, I'm so happy that we don't have Bible reading in the public schools any longer, because surely people would have picked those passages again and again and again to discriminate against gays. And gays, kids in high school, would have to hear these lessons every day, or these readings every day, and I'm glad they don't do that. And the other thing I thought was funny about this is that they thought that quoting the Bible would bring the argument to their side, that everybody would say, okay, the Bible is against homosexuality, therefore we're not going to approve of gay marriage and all that sort of thing, or gay practices even. And what happened? What happened was, the effect was to dethrone the Bible. That young people, came to think that, well, I have a gay friend and it seems perfectly sane and normal to me, and I don't care, and it's not my cup of tea, but I love my friend. And so the overall effect was to reduce respect for the Bible as a center of morality. Of course, the Bible has very little to do with morality in the first place, but except for this obsession with sex. But the effect of this has been, of the anti-gay arguments has been to dethrone the role of the Bible. And I'm very happy about that.
Now, I know I often hear, and I'm dying to find out what you have to say about this, that America was founded as a Christian nation. What are your thoughts on that?
It's absolutely not true. It was founded by people who were very secularly inclined. They had seen the results of the religious strife in Europe between the Protestants and the Catholics, and wars and this and the wars of that. I mean, when they wrote, when James Madison put into the First Amendment that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, I mean, exactly what he said. Now, it's a very important point. The Constitution of the United States does not have a single mention of God. It does not have a single mention of any commandments. It does not even request in the preamble, we ask for divine providence or divine something or other on our nation. It says, we the people do ordain. Well, that's a very humanist statement, we the people. And now, by contrast, I think let's look at the Bible. Does the Bible provide any model for democracy or our freedoms or our liberties? Not a bit. There's not a single mention in the Bible about freedom of religion. There's not a single mention in the Bible about freedom of speech or freedom of assembly or freedom of the press. The Bible doesn't even mention elections, doesn't mention the word democracy doesn't appear in the Bible. So the Bible provides absolutely no model whatsoever for our country or our society or our government.
And I know, of course, many of my listeners will be aware of these things, that if you wear mixed fabrics, you have to be killed. If you eat shellfish, you have to be killed. Adultery is punishable by death. But we ignore all of these in the United States, and the religious majority is not clamoring for shellfish to be punishable by eating shellfish to be punishable by death. Why one or two things? What is it? Control?
Well, I mean, it's always very selective, and this is what religious people do all the time. I mean, they the Seventh-day Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses comb through the Bible and pick out certain passages that they think justifies their religion, as opposed to everybody else who's in apostasy or a blasphemer or a heretic, or whatever. That's why we have so many schisms. I mean, there's somebody counted up one time that there were something like 290 different denominations in the United States. 290. I mean, we all know the big major ones, but there's zillions of little churches and little groups of Assembly of God and this, and it's because they each wants to find something that makes them unique. What makes religion unique is that its emphasis on superstition, old ways of thinking, refusal to adapt to new thoughts and new ideas. So I just can't think that further religious fervor is actually going to be good for the country or good for the individuals who believe these things. I mean, magical thinking is a very bad thing. It leads you to follow the wrong courses in medicine and follows the wrong course in life. There just is not any such thing as divine intervention, God coming into changing natural laws, the laws of nature just to please you. I mean, the whole idea is nonsensical. And this whole notion of an afterlife, that's a very pernicious idea. And I trace that, I might link that on to the jihadis who did all these horrible massacres in Paris and many other places, of course. This notion that there's an afterlife in which you're going to get rewards or punishment is just a bad idea. And it's been the cause of so much hurt and horror in the world because people believe that you do some killings, and do some unmerciful things to people, and then God will reward you in the afterlife. It's a very, very bad idea.
Absolutely, Ellery. And where can our listeners find more about you? Is there a website? Is it just the Wikipedia? Is there anything that are you doing Twitter? Are you on social media?
I don't do much of the social stuff.
Okay.
The Wikipedia article, if you really want to read about the case, there's a program, and I don't have the exact website here, but it's called the OYEZ Project. That's OYEZ at Cornell. And there they have a complete listing, a discussion of the case from a legal point of view, and it even has recordings that you can download of the actual arguments, oral arguments that were made in front of the Supreme Court in 1963. And I think that's interesting. And so the OYEZ Project comes from the phrase that the clerk of the court says when the court is ready to meet. Oyez, oyez, come here and make your arguments. So OYEZ at Cornell. You'll find it quickly on Google.
On the Google. Well, Ellery, again, thank you so much for being on the Phil Ferguson Show, and thank you for, quite a few years ago, bringing that Quran in and standing up for all of our rights. We really appreciate it, and we talk about we're moving forward on the shoulders of giants. Whether you like it or not, you kind of get to be one of those giants. So.
I'm so thankful there are people like you and your listeners who will carry on. I'm not going to be here all that much longer. I'm 75, and it's wonderful that there are younger people who come along and take up the flag and the cause. Because if you don't pay attention to this all the time, it's going to get eroded. And the Hobby Lobby is one example of that. The Greece, New York decision about prayers in city council meetings was another case like that. And so it, as the ACLU says, it takes constant vigilance. And I think it's very important for all of us to be members of organizations like Americans United or the ACLU or Freedom from Religion Foundation, because those are the way that our lone voices get amplified by being a part of a bigger organization and bigger group.
Well, I love that call to action, and we'll wrap up on that. Once again, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you very much, Phil. And I look forward to you letting me know how I can hear it.
Of course. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Thank you so very much for listening. Just a quick wrap up with some news things you probably have heard, but in the extreme southern tip of Florida and around Cuba and some other islands in the Caribbean, there have been new record highs for water temperature. Matter of fact, in the very low, very shallow water between the southern tip of Florida and the Keys, apparently new reports have come out that the water there is as hot as 97 degrees. I think that's hotter than my pool, for those of you who are paying attention to my pool game, but swimming pool game. Hot tubs, I think, are 105 or something like that. So this water is 97 degrees, and I am concerned if a hurricane takes the right path, or maybe the wrong path, if it takes the exact path coming up and stays north of Cuba and stays in that super hot water, wow, southern Florida could be in for a world of hurt when that hot water provides more energy and more moisture to that hurricane. It could be pretty freaking bad. Although even without hurricanes, more corals are bleaching, and if it gets bad enough, which it looks like it's going to be for long enough, it just kills them. Just poof, just goes away. We also have record fires in Canada for many, many months now, and it's going to keep going on. People in the Midwest, upper Midwest, people in New England, depending on the winds, the prevailing winds, have experienced, and I had experienced a few weeks ago in Chicago, the Chicago area, extremely bad smoke in the air from fires that are hundreds of miles away. I don't think they're 1,000 miles, several hundreds of miles away. Just a lot of stuff going on with the weather and the oddities. And so, when people talk about the effects of global warming in 100 years, that's great. We have effects of global warming today, right now. It's happening. And this is why it's so important for a show like mine that touches on some of this skepticism stuff, but other shows that touch on it all the time. We need a populace that is well educated, that understands bullshit from fantasy, which reminds me real quick, someone posted that Bud Light, the company, has lost $27 billion because they had someone who was a transgender person advertising their beer. Every part of that is wrong. Every part of that is wrong. The stock didn't go down because they gave a few dollars to someone who's transgender. If the stock went down in any way because of that, it's because there's a lot of fucking bigots out there. That's what happened. Now, the stock has come up materially, And they're also comparing the stock to a short-term peak. And as you know, as regular listeners of the show, stocks go up and stocks go down. The market can go up and down, and individual stocks can go up and down independent of what the market is doing and independent of what social storm there is out there from all these people that are anti-trans, which fucking pisses me off, but that's a whole nother segment. But if you look at this stock, which is BUD, and by the way, Bud Light is not a beer company, which I've seen many times. The company is Anheuser-Busch InBev, I can't remember the SR, something like that. It's not even an American company. Anheuser-Busch got bought years ago. And Anheuser-Busch InBev, the international company, sells beer and similar drinks in something like 40 to 50 countries around the world, 1,300, 1,400 brands around the world. One of those brands is Bud Light. If Bud Light went to zero sales, it would be noticeable, but it doesn't materially affect the revenue and profits of the company. In the United States now, at least last month, the number one selling beer was Modelo. Several years ago, this company, BUD is the ticker symbol on the markets, bought Modelo. However, for an important side note, they do not deliver and promote and brew Modelo for the United States because the U.S. government said, oh, wait, that makes you in control of too much of the alcohol consumption, beer, spirits market. And so another company makes that in the United States. So that is a direct loss for the company. If people go from, in the United States, go from buying Bud Light to Modelo, it's not one of their brands in the United States. Everywhere else in the world, it is. So if its brand goes up everywhere else, they still make more money. So just some thoughts. No, it didn't lose $27 billion. Even if you cherry pick the highest point this year to the lowest point this year, it didn't lose $27 billion. If you pick from January 1st, like a normal person might do when they're not trying to make a sick, fucked up anti-trans point, the stock is down a couple percent, maybe a loss of $3 billion. But if you go back a full calendar year, which is a normal way to measure things, it's actually up several billion. So please don't share things that are lies. If you share things that are lies and false information, because this is what happened to me, why I'm kind of pissy, I would go on and say, look, here's the actual information. Here's the price of the stock here. Here's the price of the stock there. Here's the math. It's not a loss of $27 billion. I don't know. Some people just aren't willing to listen to facts and want to share information that they have, even after it's been presented to them that it's straight up factually wrong. It's not a discussion about opinions like, is red a nicer color than blue? It's actual empirical facts. So when they continue to spread things like that, I am compelled to assume that either they are trolling, okay, whatever, they are some kind of bot from another country or from within this country that is attempting to divide us, or they just are an anti-trans, anti-love bigot fucker. It just pisses me off. Anyway, unexpected rant, something I've been thinking about the last day or two. So I'm going to wrap it up. I'm assuming the show is an hour and a half. And again, thank you for listening. Please share with your friends, give 5-star review somewhere. If you have a show topic idea, you can send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. I do have now firm confirmations to a couple conferences. I have every expectation that I will be at the FFRF, Freedom from Religion Foundation Conference in Madison, Wisconsin this year. I think that is coming up in September. Forgive me for not knowing my actual dates. I think I'm going to a conference in Canada, BajaCon. I should have looked it up. I think that's right. And then later in October, of course, CFI, Center for Inquiry. I think they just call it CSICon, Center for Skeptical Inquiry, in Las Vegas. The best, most closest thing to the old time TAM the amazing meeting conferences that used to be held in Vegas. So great, fun stuff coming up in the next few months. Go check it out. Also, let you know, next February, the Central Florida Free Thought, committee? Holy shit, I'm a member. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the ginormous mega group run by the Williamsons in Central Florida, has a cruise. So if you want to go on an atheist, skeptic, secular, whatever, humanist cruise, of course, I would love to see you there because my wife and I will be there. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I do hope to see you at one of those things in the next few months. Until then, ciao.
Well, I was born too late to play in the Rolling Stones. I don't know Jimmy Page, I never met Yoko Ono. Standing with a strap, I'm rock and roll's bastard son. Go out, get drunk, get laid, have fun. Don't got $1 million, don't drive a Cadillac. Give me half a chance, cause I'm not dead yet. Not dead yet. Not dead yet. I'm a mad dog fighting with the wall against my back. You better get a bigger gun, I'm not dead yet. I've been machine gun, handgun, hijack, left for dead. Dive bomb, napalm, nuclear warheaded. Dropped from a jet plane with no parachute. Shot by a firing squad and raped by a business suit. Dancing on a landmine, one leg left. I can still crawl and I'm not dead yet. Not dead yet. Not dead yet. I'm a mad dog fighting with the wall against my back. You better get a bigger gun, I'm not dead yet. Well, you're bigger, rougher, meaner, tougher, dirtier and uglier and sneakier and trickier. You wanna shoot me with a gun, cut me with a knife. Take your bare hands and rip out my eyes. Kick me in the balls and you bit me in the neck. Well, have me again, cause I'm not dead yet. Not dead yet. Not dead yet. I'm a mad dog fighting with the wall against my back. You better get a bigger gun, I'm not dead yet. Well, there's a mugger in the alley, there's a sniper in the hall. There's a girl at the bar, wants to get